Hi, everybody. This is the podcast that I call Connecting the Lesson to the Classroom. Now, I know some of you have already posted onto your discussion board your little introduction for week one, but I thought I wanted to do something else along with the week one information besides the podcast I'd already given to you. One of the things that I feel is very important is that in this course, you're not just learning the content that goes along with the course that will help you pass the MTTC, but let's connect the content and think like a teacher. And so I call these connecting the lesson to the classroom. And so this is for week one. Now, in order to understand this connection to the classroom for week one, I thought we would take a look at just some of the basics that you've learned by going through all the reading materials, or if you haven't read them yet, that are in Blackboard for week one, you'll have a chance to do that before you take your reading quiz on Thursday. And yes, reading quizzes are always due on Thursday, and the SAU Online is going to upload a revised course calendar that's going to reflect that, because there was a little bit of miscommunication between the calendar that I adopted from the previous professor and what was written in the syllabus. So yes, all your discussion board posts due by Monday, original post, all your follow-up posts due by Thursday, and your reading quiz due by Thursday, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, going forward, I want you to remember why we teach the social studies. As elementary school teachers, we kind of get lost in some of the reasons for why we're teaching things. And I have to remind secondary social studies people of the same thing. But what we're after is right here. We're looking for our students to become informed citizens. And not just citizens, but American citizens. We teach the social studies from an American-centric perspective. We do bring in other perspectives, multicultural perspectives, and global perspectives as well. But the goal at the elementary level is to teach them about their country and gradually teach them about their world. And we're hoping to build a base for them so that as they go into high school, they have some nice base understandings of what it means to be an American citizen, the documents that will refer to some of the information about world cultures. So as you read through the GLICs for social studies, you'll see that they want us to help our students to think like historians, economists, geographers, political scientists. Well, a lot of us don't think that way. So let me just kind of break that down to what I would say that means. So under informed American citizenry, I said, we want our students to understand the history and geopolitical events and thinking that have shaped the world. Is a kindergartner going to know that? Absolutely not. But by grade 3, they're going to be introduced into some of the world events that help to shape and develop our country. And as they get into the middle school, that's definitely going to occur. Understand the foundational thoughts, beliefs, and events that shape the establishment of, the ongoing and emergence of the USA as a country. Again, grade 3, this is where this is really going to start to take root. And then understand others in the context of a global society. I don't really think that's going to be the grade 6 and 7 is where you see that. And then the last piece here is to develop these responsible citizens who are going to use critical thinking to make informed choices regarding their understanding of history, the world, and then there's a participation factor here because we want them to make positive contributions to their local area or region where they live, their state, their country, and the world. So when you're looking at these grade level content expectations, the reading was very, very clear of how they happen to be broken down, and I just wanted to create this little graphic illustration for you again. And remind you that we always start with the grade level, then there's a standard category, the standard itself, and then the expectation within that standard. So in this case, it's a kindergarten history standard, and the H2 standard category is living and working together, use historical thinking to understand the past. Underneath this is the kindergarten H2.0.02, create a timeline using events from your own lives, birth, walking, loss of first tooth, first day of school. And when we look at those kinds of things, what we're looking for here is if anything is in parentheses in the GLICs, then those are suggestions. So it says e.g. or example, those are suggestions. If it doesn't have e.g. or example, it is absolutely something you must teach because it's part of the standardized test that the students will take. So I created a little simplified lesson plan here, hopefully to make a connection of what you're learning about this benchmark standards and how to interpret these benchmark standards with what we were doing in week 1. So I've put my standard right here, distinguishing among yesterday, today, tomorrow. It's a kindergarten lesson, so we're going to keep it very, very clear. The objective is very simple. Students will be able to correctly describe the concept, events, and time when they occurred. So yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Now, if I was a teacher teaching this, and I've been in a number of elementary classrooms, you have to remember that you are teaching this at the most simplistic level, period. So I might find a story. And there's some great children's literature out there that always seems to avail itself to match up with these standards. So I might read a story that talks about yesterday and today and tomorrow. So the students are understanding the concepts of what an event would be labeled yesterday, an event. What would it mean labeled today? What would be an event labeled tomorrow? And so I would then have either on my smartboard or chart paper or my whiteboard, I'd create a chart up there and it would be labeled yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I would teach the children pronouncing the words yesterday, today, and tomorrow because many of our kindergartners are not readers yet. And we would talk about what were the things you did yesterday. And we would list those under that label in the column of yesterday. What have we done today? And so we're going to list those. And then we would talk about what are you planning to do tomorrow? So they might plan a sports team, they might have an event after school. Maybe tomorrow is PE for our class, so we can put that under tomorrow. And so then we don't want to confuse them, but we do want to start their critical thinking skills moving, where we say, so let's talk about this. If we do something tomorrow, which let's say is Tuesday, then on Thursday, then on Wednesday, when did it happen? Now that's where the confusion will occur with kindergartners. So you just have to be careful. You're going to continually show them that what happens tomorrow, a day after tomorrow becomes yesterday. During the day, it becomes today. So these are concepts that we're introducing with them, and it's that simple when it comes to creating your lesson plan. So on day 2, you can read through, or this should say day 2 right here, sorry, that the instruction, we're going to go back and we're going to see what they predicted they would do tomorrow, and now that's going to become today. And we keep building this as an idea with them over and over and over again. So that's how you would take a standard from the GLICs, and then you would create a lesson plan with it. And the idea is when we get done teaching a lesson, we go back to our objective here and we really want to know, did the students learn what we expected them or wanted them to learn? So in this case, could they describe events in time occurring within the concept of yesterday, today, and tomorrow? So I just ask you, when you look at this particular lesson plan, did it adequately address the standard? Sure. Do you think the students would learn from the standard? So you can give me your thoughts on that or keep them to yourself. But the last thing here is, okay, why don't you practice this? You're all going to be future teachers, and these are things you need to do. So there's the next standard in there under history was to create a timeline using their events. So think about how you would do this as a teacher. And as you get into your methodology courses, you'll be doing this quite frequently. Now, the next part of what we have been looking at in week 1 are the different sources within social studies. And those sources are document-wise. We're looking at primary documents, secondary documents, and then we're also looking at resources that we would use in the social studies, whether it be an almanac, an encyclopedia. Those things are all listed in the reading notes. So here, if we go back to this idea about we want an informed citizenry for the purpose of the social studies, we have to understand that a lot of history is derived through examination of sources. And so we have to ask ourselves, and ask our students, is this fact or is it fiction? Did George Washington really cut down a cherry tree? Probably a myth that he did that. So we have to also look at things. Are there biases or political agendas that are recorded in the events of history? You can go to World War II. Prior to the U.S. entry into World War II, the Olympics were held in Berlin. You had the first African American Olympian running, Jesse Owens, in the 100-meter dash. He wins the 100-meter dash, but if you look at the German references and you listen to the German radio commentators that were recorded, it is a German that wins the race, not the African American, because, of course, the German Aryan race under Hitler's propaganda machine was the superior race of the world and supposed to take over the world. Thus, the reason for putting all of the Jews and gypsies and homosexuals and other undesirables, as they were called, under the German regime into concentration camps. There's also biases. There's political agendas in the way people teach the history. So we're going to rely on, mainly in social studies, especially at the elementary level, we're going to rely on what are called secondary sources. So those are the textbooks that you're going to refer to, websites, encyclopedias, whatever those things are. But within those secondary sources, we really want our students to become critical thinkers and actively participating in their citizenship. So early on in elementary social studies, we don't work too much with primary documents, but we do start moving forward, even introducing the patriotic symbolisms of the U.S. So the American flag, the eagle, those would be considered things that were primary in their documentation. By the time we get a little bit advanced into fourth grade, we're actually having students look at excerpts from the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. So again, those are primary sources. And so I put a little bit of a lesson plan together here that would fall under civics and government. Notice the C right there. And the standard is grade 4, C2.0.2, identify situations in which specific rights guaranteed by the Constitution and Bill of Rights are involved. Examples: freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of press. Now, you wouldn't overteach this. You'd keep it as simplified as possible. And so as you look at the lesson plan, I said that here's the objectives, what we want the students to learn. They want to be able to identify the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Even though the Bill of Rights is part of the U.S. Constitution, it was added as a separate document to it. And we want them to be able to decipher. Now, that's a big word, but we want them to be able to pick out and to explain the rights that are guaranteed in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. So the first thing I would do as a teacher of this is I've projected on a screen a series of statements that are true or false when it comes to rights. And I want the students to do a little bit of a check on that so that I know what they think is a right or they don't think happens to be a constitutional right. And then we're going to either take a poll on it or I'm going to have them put those away until we get to the end of the lesson. And then most textbooks will have a section in it in the fourth grade level where they can look and read these little excerpts about those rights. And they've taken that kind of archaic English language that was used in the 1700s when the Constitution was written, and they've modified it into more of an understandable form of English for the students today. They've simplified it, and we could read through those, or volunteers could read through those. They could be put in small groups to read through those. And then we would review these and discuss that a little bit. And I might even provide them actual copies of the Constitution Bill of Rights so that they at least get to see what they look like, but then there would be a worksheet. And so they would take their worksheet and they would take their textbooks and they would work through these in groups. What are those guaranteed rights? And I like having students draw pictures because I think there's a real connection. When you can explain something through a picture, it really involves your brain doing some high level processing to make sense of what the right is and what the picture happens to be. I'd have a spokesperson bring their handout up from the group and explain those 2 or 3 rights that I gave to that group to research and create an understanding of. While they're explaining those things, slip them under a document camera. The other students happen to be writing on their pieces of paper as well. And then you can get your students to engage in some kind of feedback, probing questions back and forth. So again, how do I know my students have learned the material? Well, let's go back to that little pre-check where I gave them true and false statements. Is this right? Is this not a right? I'd have them pull out what they had assessed. And now let's see if there were any misconceptions that are now corrected. So anything they thought wasn't a right but is a right, they can correct that on their piece of paper or vice versa. And I would close the whole lesson by asking the students, now, pick 3 rights out that you can relate to and write a short fictional story where the student is the main character and they are either using their rights or they're kept from using these 3 selected rights. So that's just a simplified way of how to connect your GLIC into a lesson plan, and I thought that might be helpful for you. And as always, I like to ask these questions. So do you think that kind of a lesson plan would address the standard, what the students have learned from the lesson? How would you create a lesson along that standard? And besides what I used, textbook and the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, what other sources of information, resources that you've learned about during this week could you use to create in that particular lesson? So I think that this is how I like to connect what we're doing week by week into the classroom, because I don't just want you to be learning the material. I want you also to think about how you're going to apply what you're learning in this material of the social studies. Okay, I look forward to reading the remaining introductions, and then don't forget to take your reading quiz by the end of the week. And you can start working on weeks 2 and 3, which will be the Eastern Western Hemisphere. And just keep in mind that I was going through week 3 last evening and I found a broken link. So if you find broken links, let me know. But when we find links, broken links like this, I have to submit everything through the person who helps design these courses in SAU Online. It may take a while for them to put these things into place. All right, I hope you're having a fantastic first week of SST200. If you have any questions, call or email. Thank you. Bye-bye.